What secrets sit behind Simon Cowell's steely gaze? We all think we know him, the sharp tongue, the buzzers, the smirk, but at 65, his real story is far more fragile and, yes, heartbreaking. Simon was born October 7, 1959. Decades later, he became the face of talent TV. Yet off-camera, he carried losses and scars that changed him. I'm Sarah Reed, and I've spent years digging into the archives, listening to his own words, and tracing the moments that shaped him. You're watching Golden American Legends, where I take the glitz and pull back the curtain. Friends and former co-workers have said the Mr. Nasty act was turned up for ratings. The private man? Softer, quieter, a dad who cries when he talks about his parents. That contrast hooked me, because the real question is this: how did the toughest judge on TV learn tenderness, and what did it cost him along the way? I combed through podcast clips and family accounts to find the truth behind the meme. Have you ever been shocked by a public figure's private life? What do you expect to learn about Simon today? To understand the man behind the image, we start at the beginning, before the fame, before the empire, before the pain. 16 schools! 16! That's how many times Simon Cowell was transferred before he finally quit at age 16. Imagine being that teenager, always in trouble, never settled, grade slipping. The world didn't see a future mogul, they saw a restless kid who didn't fit. I dug up early profiles and old bios, and they paint the same picture: stubborn, bold, a little lost. But here's the twist: that rebel had grit, and he had a father who believed in giving him a chance. Eric Cowell, who worked in music, helped Simon land a mailroom job at EMI. Not as a star, not as a producer, in the mailroom, running errands. Simon later said he just loved being near music, even if it meant starting at the very bottom. I love this part of his story because it says so much. He didn't need a trophy to begin. He needed a door. That 1 foot in gave him a path. But how does a teen dropout in a mailroom turn into the architect of modern talent TV? The next steps were bold, risky, and bigger than anyone expected. From envelopes to an empire, let's see how he built it. From the mailroom to making pop culture, how did he do it? In the early 2000s, Simon helped invent a new kind of TV. In 2001 came Pop Idol in the UK, then The X Factor in 2004. America's Got Talent launched in 2006, with Britain's Got Talent soon after. Those formats didn't just rate well, they took over. Dozens of countries, millions of votes, and careers launched overnight. I've mapped out the timeline across old trade magazines and showreels. The pattern is clear. Simon wasn't just a judge, he was a builder. He helped discover and manage artists like Leona Lewis and One Direction, and he grew Psycho into a powerhouse that produced music and TV across the globe. And with success came a character. The black t-shirt, the raised eyebrow, the slice of truth that hurt and helped in the same breath. Mr. Nasty made great TV. But I always ask, what's the cost of playing a villain for millions of people? What do you hide to keep the show going? Because behind the catchphrases and the eye rolls lived a very different man. If the on-screen bite was a mask, what was it covering? Let's step behind the persona. Was he really that mean, or was it a part he played? The more I listened to coworkers and judges talk about him, the more I heard the same thing. The sharpness was turned up for TV. Off camera, Simon can be warm, funny, and surprisingly gentle, especially with kids. Comedian David Walliams once joked Simon would be a great dad. Years later, that would prove true. People who worked with him say he often encouraged contestants privately, even when the broadcast focused on his most biting lines. I've watched hours of early Idol and X Factor tapes next to recent Got Talent seasons. The shift is real. The tone softened over time. He still tells the truth, but the edges aren't as jagged. He smiles more, he listens longer, and he talks about family now in a way he never did before. So if the Mr. Nasty image was only part of the story, we've got to ask, what was he guarding? What pain lived under the leather jacket and the cool stare? The answer starts years before Fatherhood. It begins with a sudden loss that cracked his world in two. The call came in 1999, and nothing was the same after. It's the call no one wants. In 1999, Simon's father, Eric Cowell, died from a heart attack at home. Simon was abroad. His mother, Julie, couldn't bring herself to tell him, so his brother did. Think about that moment. The man who opened the door to his career was gone. The anchor was cut. I can still hear Simon's voice in a 2024 interview, soft, heavy, when he said, "Losing both my parents was the hardest thing that has ever happened to me." That line sits with you, because the tough judge, the man who broke hearts on TV with one sentence, was a son who had his own heart broken for real. What stands out looking at his life is the timing. He was climbing, getting louder in the culture, and at the same time he was grieving. That double life, triumph in public, pain in private, shaped the person we see today. How do you carry on after a loss like that? Where do you put the anger, the emptiness? Years later, something would pull him back from the edge. A new name would enter his house and change everything. Eric, again, but this time, a baby. Can a baby save a life? Simon says yes. In 2014, he became a dad. He named his son Eric after his father. And then, in one of his most open talks, he admitted he had reached a point where nothing mattered. He said, "Becoming a father saved my life without question." I went back to that podcast more than once. You can hear him choke up. This wasn't showmanship. It was a man saying, "I was lost, and a small child gave me a map." Fatherhood didn't erase the grief, but it gave him purpose. Feedings, bedtime, tiny shoes by the door. Simon started saying yes to moments that didn't look like work. He lit up when he talked about his boy. And with that light came change in other places too. How he spoke to contestants, how he judged, how he used his power. But life doesn't pause for joy, not for long. Just as he found hope in fatherhood, he faced another goodbye, one that would pull on every old wound. The next call brought the hardest echo of all, his mother's fading and then her passing. Then another goodbye. In 2015, Simon's mother, Julie, passed away after a struggle with dementia. He has described that time as devastating. Imagine that mix, a new baby who needs you and the loss of the person who once carried you. In his later interviews, he talks about being knocked to the floor by grief. It's not hard to see how those losses shape the quiet spaces in his life. When I pieced the timeline together from press notes and audio clips, the pattern hit me. Every big win was shadowed by a private pain. Yet through it, fatherhood kept a small light on. He kept going, changed, slower, more aware of what matters when the lights go off. If this deep dive helps you see the person, not just the persona, tap subscribe to follow more stories like this. I only ask twice per video, and this is the first, because the next part of Simon's journey isn't emotional, it's physical. It's a crash that could have ended his life, and it forced him to rebuild, bolt by bolt, day by day. Ready to see how close he came to the edge? 1 second on an electric bike can change everything. In 2020, in Los Angeles, Simon crashed and broke his back, multiple vertebrae, hours of emergency surgery, metal rods and screws placed to stabilize his spine. He later said he nearly smashed his spine to pieces. Think about waking up from that. Pain, fear, the question that hits you at 3 a.m., what if I don't walk the same again? I reviewed the reports and the post-accident interviews, and the picture is clear. This wasn't a scare. It was a hard stop. He had to heal, learn new limits, and face the truth of age and health. Accidents don't just break bones. They break habits. They force choices. Simon looked in the mirror and decided to change his life so he could be there for his son and for himself. He wasn't done, not yet, but recovery is one thing, reinvention is another. The next chapter is about the rebuild, food, sleep, movement, focus. How do you turn pain into a plan? Watch what Simon does next. How do you come back from a broken back at 60 plus? You rebuild the whole system. After the crash, Simon changed his routine. He cut out junk, slept better, and started daily exercise, especially cycling. Over time, he dropped around 25 kilos. His energy looked different. His face did too. I tracked his public updates across interviews and photo calls. The change wasn't a fad. It stuck. And the wake-up wasn't just a crash. He'd had a health scare a few years earlier and knew he'd been ignoring signs. Now, he listened. I also want to clear something up because clickbait loves this topic. There have been false rumors about mysterious new illnesses. There's no credible report of a terminal diagnosis. What's real is the work: diet, movement, care. The goal? Living long enough and well enough to see his son grow up. That kind of focus changes your voice. It changes what you say and how you say it. Which brings us back to the shows. The man who once cut with words began to guide with them, and on screen, you could feel the shift. Did Simon go soft? Not exactly. He found a new gear. Compare early clips to recent seasons. Back then, his comments could feel like a slap. Today, many moments feel like a hand on the shoulder. I rewatched auditions where a young singer choked. Old Simon might have buzzed and moved on. New Simon says, "Take a breath, try it again." He smiles more, he stands up for kids, he even hugs and means it. Friends have joked he's finished being mean, and he said fatherhood plus what he's been through gave him perspective. When you've buried both parents and rebuilt your spine, you don't waste time tearing people down, you try to help. That doesn't mean he lost his standards. It means the point has changed. Help people grow, not just make good TV. I love this phase of his life. It shows that aging isn't just decline, it can be wisdom. It can be a rewrite. So at 65, with fame, fortune, and a family, how does he balance it all right now? Let's open the door to the present day. So where is Simon now? Still working, still judging, but different. He's talked about slowing the travel and choosing family first. He's proud to be a dad and a partner, and he says he wants a life that's more than the next headline. He remains a major figure on Britain's Got Talent and America's Got Talent, and he continues to develop new projects behind the scenes. Money isn't the driver, though estimates put his net worth around £600 million. It's impact, it's time, it's health, it's being there for the moments that actually matter. Here on Golden American Legends, I try to show how public legends carry private stories. Simon's is a mix of both. He helped design a genre that launched stars across the world. And he also showed, in public, that grief and recovery are part of a real life, even for a TV titan. So what do we do with that? We ask what his legacy will be when the lights dim. Triumph, tragedy, or an honest blend of both? Let's bring it home. How should we remember Simon Cowell? As the snarky judge? As the architect of modern talent TV? Or as a man who lost, broke, healed, and chose to be kinder? I think the real Simon is all of it. The edge, the empire, the scars, the father with a soft voice for his son. He once said he wants to be remembered as someone who helped people. After hearing his words about his parents and watching his shift after the accident, I believe him. His story reminds me that even the strongest-looking person can be hurting, and even the most wounded person can change. Which part of Simon's journey moved you most? Drop your thoughts. I'll be reading and featuring some next week. If this deep dive spoke to you, please subscribe, like, and share. We only ask twice, and this is the last. Thanks for watching. And here's a question to take with you. When your own story hits a hard chapter, what do you want your next page to say? Because Simon's story isn't over. Neither is yours.